According to calculations and patterns observed in human beings, evolutionary biologists argue that it is impossible for us to have descended from only two individuals 10,000 years ago. This idea is in stark contrast with the idea that Adam and Eve are the sole progenitors of mankind, an idea explicitly mentioned in the Ahadith corpus and implied in Quran 4:1. It is with regards to this verse that commentators of the Quran enter the discussion of the lineage of mankind. If all of us are solely the offspring of Adam and Eve, then who could their children have mated with except for each other? To keep the statement true to its absolute literal haqiqi meaning from the dual pronoun Homo, the only possibility would be incest, an act strongly despised and explicitly forbidden in all Abrahamic religions. This is the explanation that many Christian theologians and Muslims have given, with support from the Ahadith literature, though with less support from 12 eSHIA Ahadith. Allama Tabataba'i, Ayatullah Nasir Makarim Shirazi, and Ayatullah Javadi-Amoli all contend that the presence of the dual pronoun Homo indicates that there was no third party involved in the spread of mankind. Had there been other third parties involved, a plural pronoun would have been more appropriate as opposed to the dual. As such, they take the zahir, prima facie, haqiqi, literal meaning of the verse as a strong piece of evidence that conclude that incest is the likelier possibility. These are not the only explanations that exegetes have brought forth to elaborate how mankind spread from Adam and Eve. As mentioned in part 1, it is possible to move away from a prima facie zahir interpretation in the case that there is reason to do so, like additional context, siyaq, and other indicators, qara'in. Reasons to move away from a prima facie understanding include the Ahadith literature, and possibly the genetic data we explored earlier. There is a group of Ahadith narrated from the Imams that explicitly and vehemently deny incest and mention that God is more powerful than to procreate mankind through an incestuous relationship. They go on to say that God sent down a jinn and a hora in the shape of women to mate with the sons of Adam. Because of this, some have concluded that the Ahadith insinuating incest were said out of taqiyya, dissimulation. However, Allama Tabataba'i and Ayatullah Javadi-Amoli reject the Ahadith asserting reproduction with non-humans on the basis they are not in line with the apparent prima facie, zahiri, literal haqiqi meaning of the verse. They argue that incestuous relationships between the children of Adam were not necessarily problematic, because at the time there were no legal stipulations against it. In their view, there is not sufficient evidence to reject prima facie literal reading of the Quran. Neither Ayatollah Javadi-Amoli nor Allama Tabataba'i use the Ahadith literature to extrapolate meaning from the verse. This is due to their hermeneutical policy, in which they do not use uncertain Ahadith literature for exegesis. The only Ahadith that they use are traditions that have reached the level of qat, i.e., there is a high level of certainty in their reliability. Beyond these two options, reproduction via incest or with other beings, Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi in Tafsir Nemuneh brings a third option forward. He says, quote, "If we are to say that when there is conflict between ahadith, then that which is in agreement with the apparent nature of the Quran should be given preference, then we must take the first set of ahadith, i.e. incest, as it is more in line with the verse in question. Here, however, there is also another possibility that can be said, and that is that the children of Adam married individuals from the remaining population of previous humans. This is because, according to our ahadith, Adam was not the first human on earth, and modern science also shows that a type of human was most likely living millions of years before while in history. Not much time has passed between the creation of Adam until now. According to this, we must agree that there were humans before Adam who lived on Earth, that were in the process of extinction when Adam was created. So what obstacle is there for the sons of Adam to have mated with the remainder of this population? However, as we have said, this possibility is not as compatible with the apparent zahir nature of the verse in question. This topic requires more discussion that is beyond the scope of tafsir." End quote. This argument is compelling, especially because evolutionary biologists are vehemently against the idea that we are not related to previous species due to identical genetic sequences. Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi's suggestion would explain these genetic sequences and solve the problem proposed by evolutionary biologists, as we could then trace our ancestry to these other hominid species, in addition to Adam and Eve. Unfortunately, this would contradict the stories mentioned in the Ahadith literature that contend that other human-like species were completely destroyed before Adam. The crux of the issue is that evolutionary biologists argue that our DNA contains genetic markers that indicate that we share parts of our DNA with other Homo species, like Neanderthals. The idea that these genetic markers must be inherited versus unique to individuals is the foundational premise over which DNA is analyzed and ancestral populations estimated. The main Quranic tension with this idea lies in the level of literal haqiqi extremity with which we wish to understand the verse. It is possible to entertain the idea that we are also descendants of these other Homo species, if we're willing to work from a meaning of the verse that is still literal but arguably less so. Moreover, we would also need to reject literal meanings of the Ahadith literature almost entirely. When the Quranic verse states that a group of people are descendants of two individuals, does that mean that they are the genetic product of only those two individuals? Does staying true to this statement necessitate that there should not be any other individuals contributing to their DNA? One could argue that the apparent nature of the verse wouldn't negate the possibility of other DNA contributors. For example, when we discuss families and ancestral lines, we may note a certain grandfather and grandmother and note all of their grandchildren as part of their lineage. However, there are third-party contributors to DNA of their grandchildren. Despite this, we would continue to contend that these two individuals are the ancestors of those grandchildren. Calling them the grandchildren of those two individuals would not be contradictory to the prima facie meaning, khilaf al-zahir. It would continue to be a literal haqiqi meaning of the verse. However, it would not be a zahir prima facie meaning. What the discussion simmers down to is whether a literal haqiqi reading of the verse necessitates only two contributors to our current DNA pool. If not, the verse could mean that our shared ancestors are Adam and Eve, and possibly Nuh. And this is what defines the literal accuracy of referring to mankind as Bani Adam, and Adam as Abul Bashar. Interestingly, the verse notes that numerous men and women have come from these two, though it doesn't literally unequivocally state that all human beings have spread from them. The verse does not bring any particle or word that indicates all, which could be noted by using the words jami'an or kull. It simply says many. In response to the possibility that the verse could be alluding to other human ancestors, Ayatullah Javadi-Amoli in Tafsir Tasneem explains that this clearly goes against Ahadith, where it has been unequivocally stated that Adam and Eve are the sole progenitors of mankind. He elaborates further, contending that the word numerous must be read in light of the fact that the verse qualifies that its audience is all of mankind. In this light, the word kathir, numerous, is not relative to something else, i.e., it is not to say that many men and women were spread from Adam and Eve in comparison to the offspring of others, but rather it is numerous inherently as an elaboration. He says that it does not matter that most people are from Adam and Eve, indicating that a small group of people are from other than Adam and Eve. To support this further in his tafsir lessons, he also brings forward the fact that all of humanity is referred to as Bani Adam in the Qur'an on several occasions. In 8 different instances, the Qur'an speaks to Bani Adam as a direct reference to all of mankind. Thus, Ayatullah Javadi-Amoli's conclusions is that the verse is most likely speaking about all humans in existence as the direct descendants of Adam and Eve. However, he does not unequivocally negate the Quranic plausibility of our ancestry consisting of more than just Adam and Eve. He says, quote, "The ancestry of current human beings from various mothers and fathers is not rationally impossible. However, a definitive reasoning for this has not yet been established, such that we would move away from a zahiri prima facie meaning of the verse and a hadith. The diversity of races and skin colors has also evolved over a long period of time due to environmental differences. The existence and discovery of fossils and the skeletons of humans from millions of years ago does not harm the issue of the emergence and reproduction of the current generation of human beings, especially of Adam and Eve. Before Adam, many human beings were created and then became extinct, and the current generation of human beings on Earth all reach Adam and Eve." End quote. Since evolutionary theory presupposes that chance is the main actor, it delineates any explanation beyond inheritance as improbable. If the author of all these DNA sequences is God, and he loves patterns and order, observable in every facet of this universe from single cells to glorious galaxies, why couldn't he create creatures using the same DNA pattern that he had created in other organisms? The only argument against this would be that it is unlikely. This argument does not hold if one negates the idea of randomness in the universe. As such, the foundations of evolutionary theory, chance and probability, become obsolete. The belief in a sole creator and author of the universe renders the idea of God replicating DNA from other creatures as a possibility. In fact, one of the ahadith cited earlier, it is mentioned that previous generations of humans were created from the crusts of the earth. What if this is alluding to previous DNA sequences from the remains of previous hominids on earth, when it is said that Adam was created from dry clay drawn from an aging mud? What if it is meant so literally that God created Adam from the remains of previous evolved Homo sapiens? The terms used in the various ayat indicate a stinking substance that has aged, drawn from the earth itself. Many scholars have chosen to interpret this figuratively, but perhaps a literal reading is possible if it was previous DNA sequences that were meant.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.